Joining us by phone to talk about an updated post entitled, we talked about this before, if you think the Capitals are good, of course you're still right. John Press from Japers Rink putting that together in a recurring piece, and on to talk about it. Glad to have with us again this week, Rob Parker from Japers Rink. Hey, Rob.
Hi, John. Happy Friday. Hope Denver's treating you well.
So far, so good. Haven't seen a ton of it, but the sun is out, and it is glorious, unlike what we saw yesterday. Going through this piece a little bit this morning here prior to practice and the Caps getting ready for the Avalanche, there's a lot that's trending in the right direction. I think we all saw the game with Braden Holtby and what he was able to do against the Flyers, and even the Flyers media, who have not always been kind to Washington players. Very complimentary of his effort. He becomes the number one star of the game, and boy, did he deserve it. Let's start with a goal before we move out toward possession numbers and other things. I thought Braden Holtby was terrific the other night.
Yeah, definitely. And the encouraging thing, we talked about him a couple weeks ago, and he was still kind of on that good game, struggle game, however you want to characterize it, but he's strung a few in a row together, and he was great against Philadelphia. That game could have easily not gotten to overtime at all, so that's probably the most encouraging thing, that it looks like they've got their ace back, and if he keeps playing like that, he'll erase a lot of mistakes, and there's no chance that they're not going to be in a game. So, we talked about how crucial it was that they were playing so many one-goal games, and he was giving them a chance, so if he's going well, it's a real hard team to beat.
Without a doubt, and the possession numbers, Rob, maybe a little bit of a concern as far as the team's performance over this last little stretch, but we have seen some marked improvement, the Columbus game to the Philadelphia game, but with the recent improvement we've seen, maybe some reason for optimism as the Capitals in his final multi-city road trip, now getting ready to come home and see some division rivals down the stretch here next week.
Yeah, definitely. They had a little bit of a dip starting in February where they actually went to a point where they were getting outshot, and that's not a good position to be in. They finally got on the right side of that, so they're taking more shots. I know that the people who are really into the kind of more advanced modern analytics look at that possession number as sort of the prime factor to look at. Obviously, you want to be on the right side of it, but one of the things that I always try to remind people, and JP has talked about this a lot as well, is you got to look at raw numbers. And when you look at, let's just say the Caps continue to not be, great at possession, and the Flyers continue to be, presuming they meet again, there's like a 3% gap in possession. And if you break that out over the course of a 7-game series, it's like one shot per game. So there's no way that small possession difference is going to be make or break. So, for me, they got their game back going. They're on the right side of possession. I'm not going to try to nitpick over 0.5% or 1% even, because once you start getting into those playoffs, the percentages are really what's going to drive the outcome versus the possession. When I say percentages, I mean save percentage and shooting percentage. If the goalie's making saves, he's going to erase that difference pretty quickly.
The defensive effort, we've spent a lot of time in the last 2, 3, 4 games, maybe even a little bit longer. Dmitry Orlov has ridden the roller coaster a little bit. Thought Dmitry played pretty well in the game against the Flyers on Wednesday. But overall, the defensive act seems to be together. The shots against numbers have been part of it. Maybe talk a little bit about the defense and where the numbers of the post and some of what is within the article here on Japers Rink right now, maybe where we're at right now.
Yeah, so when we looked at the change in that possession, it's really been driven by the shots against, and I don't think that's a huge surprise. For one, that's kind of Barry Trotz's mentality. It always has been. And then secondarily, when we talked about the Vezina for Holtby discussion, you'd mentioned that, Carlson's been out, Orpik's been out. They've had all this turnover on the blue line, so they've gotten those guys back. That Trotz has made some noise about not being too happy with their performance lately, so it doesn't surprise me that the defense is sort of coming together. The offense, you look at it, and teams they're playing are scrambling for playoff seeding, just trying to get into the playoffs. So they're going to be real hard. They're not going to give up an inch, and that without that natural intensity coming from desperation, it doesn't surprise me that they're maybe getting out-competed in ways that they weren't earlier in the season on the offensive end. So I'm hoping that it comes back. Their percentages on offense also haven't been great, so they probably deserve a few more goals than they've actually gotten. But you look at it, at least they've gotten their defensive game back. They've gotten their goaltending back. That's a pretty good recipe to advance in the playoffs. So that's kind of the bright spot that we're seeing. And if you want some real detailed numbers, you can go read the post. But yeah, that's the thrust of it.
Yeah, definitely take a look at the post. Just tweeted it out off the Capitals radio feed. And if you're not already following at Capitals Radio, you should probably correct that as well. Offense maybe lagging a little bit. I mean, you only come up with one goal, and it's a power play goal in Philadelphia. But by and large, against a team that was in playoff playoff mode, and it was just the kind of game where there didn't seem to be a whole lot of offense to begin with. But where is this team trending now as we get down to the final half dozen games to go here in the regular season? Where is the offense trending, and how do the numbers, and how does that just from an eye test standpoint, how does that feel?
The numbers are trending in a positive direction. It's not quite as strong as the defensive trend, as I was indicating, and it doesn't make me real happy that they look like they're relying a little bit more on the power play again, because obviously in years past we've seen that power play dry up. But they're shooting, I think, just north of 5% recently. You'd expect a team like this to shoot somewhere around 8 or 9%. And so if they even, just get a little bit of a regression back to where you'd expect, the goals are going to start coming. You saw, against Columbus, it was one of those games where they had all these chances, they had the possession, they had the shots, and they couldn't get a goal. And then in the third period, they got a few, real quick. And I'm glad they made Brandon Dubinsky pay for that stupid penalty going after Holtby. Just one of those things in the sport where sometimes they come in bunches. Unfortunately, they couldn't quite get it against the Flyers, but, they had their looks, and I tend to look at the talent on that forward group and think that it's you give them looks, they're going to start getting goals. So hopefully they get this relative dry spell out of their system before the playoffs start, and then they can start finding the net again.
I guess let's call it the final exam here, because by the time that you and I chat again next, Rob, at the end of next week, we're down to the final weekend of the regular season. The Caps going to be heading to St. Louis. They got the home game with Anaheim on Sunday night. By that point, at least at the end of the night, Sunday night, the Caps will know who they will face in round one of the Stanley Cup playoffs. There's been a lot of discussion through the course of what has been a miraculous year. What's the overall feel and vibe around this team with the playoffs just around the corner? Would think just from what we've seen here over the last few games that if there was a lull, and there seemed to be, and understandably so, given the fact that they have been playing for not a lot, they've had the President's Trophy realistically wrapped up and now mathematically wrapped up. How do they feel? How do you feel with what you've seen here going into the Stanley Cup playoffs?
I think they probably feel pretty good. I don't think they're going to buy into a lot of the narrative, or I tend to think that teams and players don't buy into the advanced possession numbers as much as fans generally do. Their starts have sort of evened out a little bit. They aren't getting down 3-0 like they were for that little stretch, and their game has been pretty solid. Their defense is back where it needs to be, Holtby's back where it needs to be. So I think they're confident. I think, when the games start mattering again for them, they're going to think that they can play with anyone, and for good reason. It's hard to apply some of these statistical models to this team, because when was the last time you can remember a team running away from their conference by early February, running away from the President's Trophy race in early March, winning the league in the regular season by, it's going to end up being something around 15, 20 points. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So there's not a lot of examples of teams that have done that, and trying to see whether or not they could keep it up, or whether they hit that natural human emotion lull. And I am looking at them right now. They're at 750 points percentage. I cannot ever remember in any sport a team with a 750 points percentage being disrespected like this team. I mean, just yesterday on Twitter, there was a chart posted that had them as underdogs against the Flyers if the playoffs started today. And I just can't believe it. I get it. These guys are running numbers. They have their model. Maybe the lesson there is when you're looking at statistical models, you need to be really careful on what your methodology is and exactly what you're looking at. But I just don't buy it. It's going to be close. Parity that's the nature of the game right now. But they're healthy, pending, Backstrom being banged up right now. They've been playing much better for the last probably 3 weeks, so I'm ready for the playoffs. Bring it on, and I think they've got a great chance.
I am ready as well, and I got to say, if anybody is seriously talking about the Flyers being a favorite over the Capitals, they probably have a Brooklyn Bridge that they want to sell you to. Rob Parker, the name of the post. If you think the Capitals are good, of course, you're still right. Appreciate the weekly hits, sir. Have a great weekend. We'll chat next week.
Great. You too.